President Trump is in Georgia today to talk about what has become a punchline in Washington: infrastructure. The White House announced the first so-called infrastructure week 3 years ago, only to have the president use the event's unveiling to mostly rail against former FBI Director James Comey. Now, though Mr. Trump won Georgia by 5 points in 2016 and Georgia has voted Republican for the past 28 years, right now Joe Biden has a slight lead in the Georgia polls. Tia Mitchell joins me now. She is the Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Tia, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Break this down for us, if you will. Is this a story of the president losing some favor in Georgia or Joe Biden gaining it?
I think in Georgia, it's a combination of Democrats being very energized in Georgia. There's still a lot of energy as far as expanding the Democrat electorate in Georgia that started with the 2018 campaign and Stacey Abrams' campaign for governor. But there are Republicans and kind of those swing moderate voters who are falling out of favor with President Trump. They don't like his response during the pandemic. They're concerned now about the economy and their health. They're also concerned about the racial issues that have been highlighted, and particularly amongst college-educated voters in Georgia and senior voters in Georgia, they're starting to look at Biden.
Now, Biden has invested in ads for several battleground states, but not Georgia. Do you expect that this will change?
That is part of the conversation as Democrats are starting to talk to Biden and ask him to expand the map. We know there's been a lot of conversations about new states being in play, Georgia being one of them, Texas being another, which are not traditionally states that you would expect a Democrat running for president to feel like they can compete in. And so as polls recently are starting to indicate that Joe Biden has a chance of winning in Georgia, Democrats are asking him to put the state in play. It hasn't happened yet. I think those conversations are ongoing. What Georgia has against it is twofold. Number one, there are swing states that are larger in Georgia and would therefore have a bigger payoff with the Electoral College. And also because there has not been a Democrat has not won statewide in Georgia in over 20 years, roughly. So, that I would think gives the Biden campaign, some hesitancy about spending money.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about, some of the Senate races. Two vocal supporters of President Trump are fighting for Senate seats in Georgia. Senator Kelly Leffler is facing a challenge from Congressman Doug Collins. What has the president said about this race?
So the president has not endorsed Kelly Leffler, but he does speak highly of her. Even his remarks today while he was in Atlanta, he just completed his remarks a few minutes ago, and he spoke well of Kelly Leffler. He spoke well of Senator David Perdue, as in the context of them being sitting senators and the incumbents. So Kelly Leffler, I think, knows that perhaps the best she can expect right now from the president is for him to stay out of the race. I think that's what she's hoping for. Of course, she would like an endorsement, but I think she's hoping he just stays out of the race, because we know that initially President Trump wanted Doug Collins to be appointed to that Senate seat. And that didn't happen, and Doug Collins decided to run in the special election. And so it's pretty unlikely, we think, that Trump will endorse Kelly Leffler, but she's hoping he doesn't endorse Doug Collins.
Right. All right. So you know better than anyone that, Georgia had record turnout for its primary election in June, but all did not go well. There were those hours-long waits at polling places, problems with voting machines, undertrained poll workers. It took the state a full month to certify the results. What is being done to fix this before November?
Well, that is still a work in progress in Georgia. There has been talks about, of course, hiring more poll workers, hiring younger poll workers. They are still, this time, the Secretary of State has said he will not automatically mail absentee ballot requests to every voter as he did ahead of the primary. But some municipalities, for example, DeKalb County, which is part of Metro Atlanta, is mailing those ballot requests to every voter. So I think Georgia officials are still addressing the problems. They're still kind of doing that forensic study of all that went wrong back in June. There is another trial run in August. We have runoffs. It'll be on a smaller scale because there aren't as many races on the runoff ballot, but that will give the state another chance. This is new voter equipment and a new voter system that's being used in Georgia. So there are still kinks to work out, but I think that elected officials believe that, number one, some of it was just that first rough go of it, the pandemic and social distancing, but they are working, if nothing else, on staffing up better for November.
And Tia, Georgia has faced accusations of voter suppression for the past few years. What evidence is there to support that that might be happening? And if so, is the state trying to address it?
So that's something, again, that really became an issue raised by Stacey Abrams in the lead up to her race, as well as in the weeks and months after she lost narrowly. And she believes to this day, and a lot of her supporters believe, that had Georgia elected officials managed that election better, managed absentee and mail-in voting and better, that perhaps she could have narrowed the race or even won it. And as we know, at the time, Brian Kemp was the Secretary of State who was in charge of elections. And so I think that there still remains concerns when you see those long lines and, you know, some voter watchdog groups and Democratic groups will say, we predicted this. We knew it was going to happen, and the state should have been better prepared. The state should have anticipated some of these problems and made better decisions. So when you talk about disenfranchisement, that's really what it centers on right now, is the decisions being made, how elections will be managed, how many early voting sites are going to be open, and those type of decisions that can affect experience at the polls on Election Day.
All right. Well, Tia Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.